One of the methods that psychologists use very commonly for collecting data involves the use of surveys and polls and questionnaires. And the reason for using these kinds of procedures is fairly obvious. You can collect a lot of information from a lot of people quite inexpensively. At the same time, the use of surveys and questionnaires does raise a number of procedural and methodological issues. One that may have occurred to you if you've ever taken a questionnaire is, are people responding honestly to the questions that you're asking them? And these may be questions about their attitudes, it may be questions about their feelings, they may be questions about their beliefs, maybe questions where they're reporting about their behaviors. But one always has to be somewhat concerned about whether the respondents really are giving you as honest an answer as they can. One area of research where this, not surprisingly, turns out to be a very significant problem involves studies of sexual behavior. One of the main tools we use for studying sexual behavior is by asking people about their behavior, but we know that people chronically make somewhat dishonest answers on questionnaires about sexual behavior. Luckily, we tend to know actually the way in which they make these answers dishonestly. Males, we know, tend to, on sexual behavior questionnaires, tend to exaggerate the frequency of sexual activity, the number of activities they've engaged in, and they tend to report that they lost their virginity at a younger age than was really the case. Females, on the average, show a bias in the opposite direction. But, well, more severe in that kind of work, it is an issue in a lot of areas of research. A somewhat related problem is whether respondents are even capable of responding accurately to the questions that you're asking them. If we are asking people, for example, to report on patterns of behaving or how they feel in different situations, even when people are trying to give the best, most honest answer that they can, they may not always be particularly accurate. We do not always have perfect insight into the reasons why we behave in different ways. We don't always keep an accurate record of how we behave and how we feel in different situations. In working with children, this can be a particularly serious problem. Young children simply lack insight into their own thought processes. They really aren't aware of how they think and feel in different situations. As a result of that, developmental psychologists often talk to parents about their children's behavior using questionnaires. But parents, even when trying to be honest about their children, tend to give biased answers. They may not know really how their children behave sometimes, or their memory for their children's behavior changes over time since the behavior actually occurred, often in a more positive direction. So, little angel Johnny may not really be quite such an angel if you ask other people about his behavior instead of asking his mother. Another issue that's raised by the use of questionnaires and surveys and polls, and really the one I want to focus on the most here, involves the selection of a sample to study. Now let me talk about sampling and populations for a minute. In general, no matter what kind of research one is doing, no matter what kind of method of data collection one is using, we are always interested in learning something, or almost always interested in learning something about some large group of people. The group of individuals that we are interested in learning something about is called the population. Now, for a lot of research in psychology, the population that we're actually interested in is all human beings. Research on learning and memory and perception, for example, is done with the hope of obtaining information that is relevant to understanding how, people see, or how people understand language, or how people remember information, and we assume that what we're learning is true of everybody. We're trying to learn something general about humanity. Other times we may be interested in learning something only about females or only about males. Our study may be focused on learning something about children of a particular age, perhaps even in a particular geographical area. Perhaps children who have been exposed to a particular pattern of child rearing may constitute our population. Whatever that group is that we're interested in learning something about, that's the population. Now, when we actually do our research, we can never study, or virtually never study, every member of that population. Instead, we can only study usually a very, very small number, relatively small number of people who are members of that population. The people we actually study make up the sample. So the sample is comprised of the people who actually participate in our research study.